Hi, folks. It's Robert Steinbuck. I wanted to talk to you about the 4 issues on the ballot today. Issue 1 is about balancing the power between the legislature and the governor. I heard the governor speak just yesterday, and he opposes Issue 1 because, as he aptly reflected, Issue 1 shifts some power from the governor to the legislature. Right now, the legislature has less power than the governor, and Issue 1 will equalize that. It's not about more or less government. It's about who within government has what power. And Issue 1 seeks to balance the power between the governor and the legislature. If you prefer more power in the hands of the governor, then don't support it. But if you prefer more power in the hands of the branch of government most associated with the people, the legislature, you should vote yes on Issue 1. Issue 2 is about changing vote thresholds for 2 different actions. Most people know that it seeks to increase the vote threshold for constitutional amendments, like the ones we're talking about now, in fact, from 50% to 60%. But what many people don't know is that it also seeks to increase the threshold for what's known as initiated acts. Initiated acts are statutes, laws, passed by the public rather than the legislature. And it's happened several times already, including creating an ethics commission that keeps a good eye on government behavior. And so it changes that threshold from 50% to 60%. Yet acts passed by the legislature would remain at the 50% threshold. And now again, we're talking about a balance of power. This gives more power to the legislature over the people themselves. And I could never support that. So I'm against Issue 2. Issue 3 is about increasing religious freedom. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of misinformation about this. Issue 3 takes the existing standard and expands when you can oppose government action that attacks your religious freedom. Right now, under the First Amendment and the state's equivalent amendment in its Constitution, slightly differently worded, but interpreted exactly the same, you can only oppose, using those amendments, a direct attack on religion. What's an example of a direct attack? If the government passed a law, for example, that said Christmas trees are prohibited for Christians. And we know that's a direct attack because you've heard the word Christian twice in that articulation. What's an indirect attack that's not at all protected by the First Amendment? Vaccine mandates. Why? You might say, well, of course it infringes my religion. I agree. But it's not a direct attack on your religion because it applies to everybody, and it's known as a generally applicable law. Now, this isn't my view. This is Justice Scalia's view. This is the conservative and liberal view. So nobody on the Supreme Court thinks otherwise. And what this Issue 3 would do, it would say indirect attacks, like vaccine mandates, are now subject to protection by the Constitution. So some folks, including an out-of-state attorney, has put out a video recently saying, oh, but you see, it says compelling government interest can be a defense for the government. That's a law today. That's a law for the last 100 years. That law has been supported by every conservative and liberal on the courts. So they say, well, but the courts might change it. If you put it in the Constitution, they can't change it. And they point to how the Dobbs decision changed Roe versus Wade. But it took 50 years to undo Roe versus Wade, and that was with a conservative justices, or many conservative justices rather, who always opposed Roe versus Wade. And that took 50 years. So with this compelling government interest test that's been supported by conservatives and liberals alike, how long is that going to take to change if you want to wait for them to change it? 100 years? And meanwhile, you don't get those other benefits that I mentioned to you about indirect attacks on your religious beliefs? And if in 100 years, some new court does away with the compelling government interest test, then we can just change it in the Constitution. We've amended the Constitution 100 times. We'll do it another 100 times, I guess, in another 100 years. So you're worried about a 100-year-old amendment? That's not where your focus should be. Right now, Issue 3 makes your religious observance protections stronger. And that's what we should be supporting. Issue 4 is about legalization of marijuana, which I don't support, so it's easy for me to vote no on this. If you do support legalization of marijuana, you should be aware, nonetheless, that Issue 4 creates a cartel, a monopoly, for a handful of drug sellers and prohibits everybody else, including you, at home from growing your own marijuana. And I'm never a big fan of government giving a power to private mega corporations that you yourself don't have. So those are my thoughts on the issues. I thank you for your time, and I hope you go out and vote.